isn't much of a market for following silent serial killers around, you know? And that is because when they're not killing people, they are boring.
Animals don't get too hung up on reason. They just keep killing.
Inaviolentnature is a quirky new horror film where a group of teens come up to camp out in the woods for the weekend, and this silent serial killer who's come back from the dead with a vengeance is out to kill them all for not really any reason. Yeah. So Johnny. Just Johnny, yeah. He was bullied as a kid and then killed, and then he's just come back as a spirit of vengeance to kill a bunch of people multiple times already, with a history that we're not really going to bother explaining. So it couldn't be any blander or less necessary or more of a Friday the 13th ripoff, except for the fact that it's all from the killer's perspective. And since it's from his perspective, we get to watch as he walks around a lot. He just does a lot of walking, man. Nothing else. It feels like they're kind of going, hey, imagine if you got to see everything that Jason Voorhees did. Wouldn't that be dull? It would be dull, don't do it. It's like the filmmakers are trying to just send a warning to other horror movie makers not to go too far outside of the box. I don't know why they have made it as an entire film. It feels like you would get halfway through the idea or the pitch and go, actually, don't bother. We do get to see the kills, of course, and they are great kills in this film. Don't get me wrong. I mean, they are way over the top, like it's excessive overkill at times, but they're really interesting ones, and you get to see some fun scenery as he's walking around. You would see the kills and those entire scenes without needing to be from his perspective. You know, that's the most interesting part of the film, and it is no different seeing it from his perspective. It's no better. For me, at least, I didn't think it was. And you wouldn't have to watch all the unnecessary parts, which are just really random after they're dead. He just keeps cutting them up. He loves taking people's heads off. I don't know why, but he loves it. There is one or two great moments. One moment where you actually just see him walk into the lake, and then just whoop, she goes down a moment later. The one swimming. That was pretty funny. And there's a great scene where one of the teens throws their car keys out, and then he goes and takes them, but it's just because he actually has the mind of a child, like Jason Voorhees, and wanted to play with the little car that they have on the keyring. That was really fun and funny. But most of the film isn't that. It sounds like it should be something where they've made it really quirky and silly. It sounds like it's going to be a Tucker and Dale versus Evil. You know, it's not. Even to the extent that one of the big things I would expect to see is how interesting it is how he sneaks up on them. Because Jason always just seems like he's just boom and vanishing, appearing somewhere else, right? And so do other killers like Michael Myers. So that's one of the big things you would want to deconstruct in this kind of a situation, right? They don't really. No. There's a couple times where he walks all the way around a house to come up behind them, things like that. It's quite interesting, but a lot of the time they just see him coming. Which is not what would happen in the normal version of this situation in any other horror film. So that's quite upsetting. That's quite annoying that even the things that I can imagine really taking advantage of, they're just not even really doing. I think the biggest problem with any deconstruction of the horror genre like this is that it's too specific. It doesn't feel so much like this is the kind of from the view of any of these serial killers. It feels too specifically about Jason Voorhees. It is Friday the 13th, and it feels like it's just ripping that off because it's taking itself seriously because it's not a parody or anything. So it does just feel a bit like, oh, okay. And if you're not even going to do anything really interesting with the aspects that it feels like you could do something with, what really was the point? Apart from walking around, he does just kind of watch these kids a little. They're quite boring. They really didn't bother doing much with that cast, which is fair enough to him, and from his perspective, they're just victims. It doesn't matter what they are, what their stories are, but he doesn't speak or have any story. We don't really get to see his motivation a lot. We understand he wants this locket thing that used to be his mother's, but he also gets distracted and seems much more interested in just brutally murdering people than going after that. So there's no depth to his character, and because we see relatively little amount of the teens, there's no depth to any of their character, and there's no depth to the story. So, And then came the ending, and the final 15 minutes, the entire time I was waiting for something to happen. And maybe the joke or the satirical punchline is that nothing happened, but my god, nothing happened. It was the most boring, confusing, dragged out ending scene in any slasher, really. It was, it sucked. It's a real shame as well, because even if they'd just done the traditional kind of final girl versus him fight thing, with her dying, with him dying, whatever, it would have been better. And the ending really dragged it down even lower for me. I thought it was a real shame. So I'm giving 10k steps on that counter, no problem for this guy. 2 stars. Maybe they could have just kept it like plainer, done the final fight, or just injected a lot more comedy throughout, or had him like kill them all off faster and then show how he would take on like the cops and stuff next. I don't know. I feel like there's something more they could have done here, but I can't think of an individual big idea that would have saved the film.